You're somewhere in your 30s or 40s. You scroll past another announcement of someone 5 years younger than you who just sold their company, raised a round, hit a milestone, got the thing you're still working toward. You smile in the comments. You close the app. And underneath the closing, there's a small, persistent voice asking the question you've been asking yourself for years. Is it too late? Has the window already closed? Have all the people who were going to succeed already succeeded? And somewhere in there, you've started to suspect the answer is yes. And that suspicion has been wrong this entire time. If you've spent years watching your peers pull ahead, while you stayed behind, switched directions, started over, failed at things, and you've assumed this means your timeline has run out. The psychology of late success is doing something you've probably never had named for you. Late success isn't a consolation prize for people who failed at early success. It isn't compensation. It's a fundamentally different developmental shape. One the culture doesn't notice, doesn't celebrate, doesn't teach you to recognize in yourself, but one that produces some of the most consequential outcomes any human life ever produces. Here's the thing nobody talks about. The cultural story about success assumes a single shape. You find your direction young, you build steadily, you achieve in your 20s and 30s. By 40, you are visibly somewhere on the trajectory the world recognizes. That story is real. It happens to some people, it doesn't happen to most people, and for a meaningful fraction of the population, it never happens in that shape. Not because they fail, but because they're running a different timeline. The late success timeline looks like this. The first 3 or 4 decades are spent collecting things the person doesn't yet know they're collecting. Skills from jobs that didn't work out. Patterns from relationships that ended. Knowledge from industries they left. Failures that taught them what they actually wanted. By the time they finally land on the thing that becomes their life's work, they bring to it a depth of accumulated material that no early success person could possibly have. The apparent failures weren't failures. They were inventory. In the 1990s, psychologist Anders Ericsson published the research known popularly as the 10,000 hours principle. Ericsson documented that mastery of complex domains requires roughly 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. What gets less attention is the second finding. The 10,000 hours don't have to be consecutive. They don't have to be in the same domain. They don't have to look like practice at the time. Late successes almost always turn out to have been accumulating their 10,000 hours across decades of jobs, relationships, and apparent dead ends that, from inside, looked like they were going nowhere. Consider one example. Harlan Sanders ran a small gas station restaurant in Kentucky for years. He lost it when an interstate highway bypassed his location. At age 65, reliant on a $105 Social Security check, he started driving around the United States in a 1946 Ford, trying to convince restaurant owners to use his fried chicken recipe. By the time he sold Kentucky Fried Chicken at 73, the company had over 600 locations and made him the equivalent of $20 million in today's money. The 40 years of apparent failure weren't a delay before his success. They were the material his success was made of. Picture this. You're 41. You're sitting in a coffee shop with your laptop. Across from you is someone 26 who just got a job you would have wanted 10 years ago. You're not jealous. You're past jealous. You're at the harder place, wondering if you've simply been wrong about your own life. Maybe the thing you've been building toward isn't coming. Maybe the long detour you've been on wasn't a detour. Maybe it was just the road. That sentence is the most common false conclusion in late bloomer psychology. The detour is the road, but the road is not nowhere. The road is the thing that produced the version of you sitting in this coffee shop, with the specific accumulation of experience, perspective, hard-won pattern recognition, and emotional depth nobody in their 20s has yet earned. That accumulation is your inventory. The thing you do with it, when you finally do it, will only be possible because of what the detour gave you. But here's where it gets interesting. The late success timeline has a specific psychological signature. People on this timeline tend to have an unusual relationship with failure. They take it seriously without taking it personally. They tend to be good at extracting information from disappointment. They tend to be the person their friends come to for perspective, because by midlife, They have accumulated more genuine perspective than the people whose lives followed the standard arc. None of that shows up on a resume. All of it is real. But there's more going on than just accumulation. The late timeline tends to produce a kind of resilience that early success can't manufacture. Early success teaches confidence. Late success teaches durability. The person who has failed at 6 things and is still working on the 7th has a different relationship to setbacks than the person whose first thing worked. Both are real forms of strength. The cultural story celebrates only the first. The second, when it finally pays off, often produces work that lasts longer because the person making it has already learned how to keep going after it stops working. And here's the kicker. The cultural framing of late success has been almost entirely as exception. The Colonel Sanders story gets told as a curiosity, an outlier, the inspiring exception. Almost no public story frames it as a normal alternative shape of a successful life. That framing has cost millions of people their confidence in their own timelines because they've spent years measuring themselves against the wrong story. The late success timeline isn't an exception. It's a standard human shape. Now let's be honest. None of this is a guarantee. Not everyone whose early decades look like accumulation eventually lands on the thing that uses it. Some late timelines never get to the success part. The reframe is about the shape of the timeline, not a promised outcome. If your situation involves real material concerns, money, family, health, those are real regardless of what timeline you're on. The point isn't that everything will work out. The point is that the years you've been calling failure may be the years your success was being built from, and the absence of visible result yet is not the same as the absence of accumulating material. But for the people whose lives have been quietly accumulating material that hasn't yet produced visible result, here's what's happening. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not the person who missed the window. You're someone running a different timeline than the dominant story celebrates, and the years you've been calling wasted are the years your future work is being built from. The detour is the road. The collection is the preparation. The version of you with the accumulated experience nobody can see yet is the version that will eventually do the work nobody on a faster timeline could possibly have done. The work isn't to catch up. The work is to recognize that the timeline you're on is a real shape, that the accumulation is real value, and that the thing it will be used for is still ahead of you. Not behind, ahead. There's something quietly powerful about a life that takes longer to arrive. The people who get there fast often spend the rest of their lives defending what they already have. The people who get there slow spend the early decades collecting the material that the later decades will use. Both can be good lives. Only one produces the kind of work that has the weight of 4 decades inside it. If you've spent years assuming your timeline was a problem, this might be the moment to consider that you've been reading the evidence wrong. The window hasn't closed. The window is still being prepared. The version of you that will eventually walk through it is being made right now in the work that doesn't look like work, in the failures that don't look like progress, in the long, unobvious accumulation the culture has no language for. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not the person who missed the window. You're someone running a different developmental timeline than the dominant story celebrates, and the years you've been calling failure are the years your future work is being built from. If this is the first time someone has named that for you, you might really like this channel. Silent awareness puts words to the quietly different ways your mind and your life work, the things nobody else talks about honestly. Hit subscribe and the bell so the next finds you.